Can silence be louder than an official announcement, more earth-shaking than a press conference, and more capable of triggering mass panic than an information leak? This is the question now hanging in the air within the global ARMY community, ever since something unmistakably unusual began to be collectively noticed. HYBE has suddenly gone quiet, Si-hyuk has vanished from the public spotlight, and amid all of this, the name Jungkook is being mentioned more and more frequently, not because of a statement, but because of his suspicious silence. Why, at the very moment when the biggest BTS news in years has finally been announced, have the most influential figures behind the scenes chosen not to speak? And why does March 20th feel like more than just an album release date, but rather the ignition point of something far greater? News of the release of BTS's fifth album on March 20th, 2026, at 1 p.m. Korea Standard Time came like a bolt from the blue. Information shared through the X account at Chartmaster instantly swept across global timelines, sparking euphoria, tears, and disbelief among millions of ARMY who had waited for years. After a long hiatus due to mandatory military service, after a silence on stage that felt like a collective emotional void, BTS would finally return as one complete unit. This so-called fifth album is said to contain 14 tracks, each described as an honest story reflecting the true BTS, a phrase that for ARMY is not merely a musical description, but an emotional promise. Yet this is precisely where the first oddity appears. When an announcement of this magnitude would normally be accompanied by a series of official statements, media interviews, or at least a brief comment from a central figure like Si-hyuk, widely known as the main architect behind BTS's success, the opposite happened.
HYBE silence.
There was no additional clarification, no in-depth explanation, no appearance of Si-hyuk on screen, no circulating quotes from him. This silence, rather than being reassuring, felt like a deliberate clue, as if there were something not yet allowed to be revealed, something too big to be announced all at once. ARMY's reactions on X became the most honest mirror of that collective unease. Amid joyful screams and crying emojis, questions began to surface, growing sharper with time. Why is it called the fifth album? One fan asked in confusion, as if the number itself carried a hidden riddle. Others admitted they couldn't believe this moment had finally arrived, while some immediately fixated on details that seemed small yet significant. The 14-track count, the announcement of a world tour scheduled for January 14, 2026, and a minimalist visual teaser featuring a pink circle forming the number 2026. All of these elements felt like puzzle pieces that had yet to form a complete picture. In the midst of this frenzy, one name continued to echo in a different way: Jungkook. Not because he made a sensational statement, not because of an explosive social media post, but precisely because of the absence of the signs he usually gives. Jungkook, long known for having his own way of conveying emotion, sometimes through a gaze, sometimes through a pause, has now become the center of speculation. ARMY began to wonder, is Jungkook's silence merely a coincidence, or is it part of a larger narrative? Could he be holding on to a comeback secret yet to be revealed, a detail intentionally withheld until the right moment? Si-hyuk's disappearance from the public only strengthened these theories. Throughout BTS's history, nearly every major era has been marked by his presence, either directly or symbolically. When he does not appear, the public has grown accustomed to interpreting it as a sign that something unusual is being prepared. Pop culture academics even often refer to this pattern as strategic silence, a communication strategy in which the absence of a message functions as the message itself. In this context, HYBE's silence is not emptiness, but a deliberately left open space designed to let the public's imagination run free. March 20th has therefore gradually taken on a new meaning. It is no longer just an album release day, but a symbol of a new era that feels not yet fully defined. ARMY has begun connecting that date with various small clues scattered around, from teaser designs to the narrative of honest stories promised in the album. If this album is truly meant as a thank you to fans who faithfully waited, why does so much feel deliberately withheld? Why is there a sense that what has been announced is only the surface of something far deeper? Music analysts predict that this album will break streaming and sales records, given BTS's massive and loyal fan base. But beyond numbers and statistics, there is an emotional layer that cannot be measured by data. BTS is not merely a music group. They are a global cultural phenomenon whose relationship with fans is built on emotional honesty and personal narrative. That is why even the smallest change in their communication patterns is instantly read as a signal. And when that signal takes the form of silence, interpretations become even wilder. The return of all BTS members to public activities at the end of 2025 was supposed to mark the end of the long waiting period caused by military service. Jin, Suga, J-Hope, RMV, Jimin, and Jungkook came back as individuals who had undergone different experiences, bringing with them a new maturity expected to be reflected in their work. This fifth album, with its 14 tracks said to be filled with honest stories, seems to be the vessel for pouring out that entire journey. Yet again, the way this album has been introduced feels different from before, quieter, more restrained, and therefore far more intriguing. The official website 2026bts.com, currently still in its teaser phase, only adds another layer of mystery. It is believed to become the central hub for comeback information, but for now, it feels more like a door that has not been fully opened. ARMY who visit it find more questions than answers. Is this a strategy to build anticipation? Or is information being deliberately delayed for a greater emotional impact? At this point, HYBE's silence and Bang Si-hyuk's disappearance from the spotlight can no longer be seen as mere coincidence. In South Korea's highly structured entertainment industry ecosystem, every communication step is usually planned with extreme precision. When a company as large as HYBE chooses not to speak, it almost always means that what will be said later is considered more important than anything that could be said now. And when Jungkook's name continues to surface in speculation, not because of what he does, but because of what he does not do, that suspicion only grows stronger as Jungkook truly holding on to an unrevealed comeback secret. Is this silence part of a grand narrative leading up to March 20th? A surprise designed to shake not only ARMY but the global music industry itself? Or is all of this merely the projection of emotions from fans who have waited too long? These questions remain unanswered. But one thing is certain. This silence is far too loud to ignore, and whatever awaits behind March 20th, it seems unlikely to be just an ordinary album release. If HYBE's silence is a closed door, then ARMY's reaction is like hands slowly feeling along its cracks, trying to sense anything that could serve as a clue. In the world of BTS, no detail is ever truly small. Every post, every visual design, every pause in timing is reread, dissected, and interpreted with an almost academic level of scrutiny. And it is precisely here that the second chapter of this story begins to feel even more unsettling. The less official information that is given, the more patterns begin to emerge to eyes that are accustomed to waiting. The announcement of BTS's fifth album on March 20, 2026, may be the main focal point, but for many ARMY, attention quickly shifted to how that announcement was made. There was no grand press conference, no lengthy statement from management, no exclusive interviews that usually serve as the introduction to a new era. Instead, there was only a single post, a minimalist visual teaser, and one sentence that sounded simple yet heavy with meaning about music that most reflects the true BTS. A sentence that might sound like mere promotional jargon to the general public instead sparked deeper questions among ARMY. What kind of true BTS is being referred to, and why is this narrative emerging now? The teaser design featuring a pink circle forming the number 2026 also did not escape attention. Its color, shape, and simplicity felt strikingly contrasted with the scale of the comeback being prepared. Some fans interpreted it as a symbol of cycles, rebirth, or even a time marker deliberately made neutral, so its meaning could evolve as the narrative unfolds. This is where theories began to surface, no longer sounding like wild speculation, but rather like a collective effort to read the symbolic language that BTS has long been known to use in their work. Yet the most striking absence remains Bang Si-hyuk. In the context of South Korea's entertainment industry, a figure like Bang Si-hyuk is not merely a CEO or producer. He is a symbol, the face of a creative vision that has carried BTS from a rookie group to a global phenomenon. When someone like him disappears from public discourse at such a crucial moment, it becomes difficult not to see it as a deliberate strategy. Some industry observers have even begun to ask whether this is an attempt to shift the focus entirely onto the BTS members themselves. Or instead a way to hold back an even bigger surprise for later? Jungkook's name once again surfaces in the middle of this whirlwind in an increasingly compelling way. Jungkook, the youngest member often referred to as the Golden Magne, has long been known for his emotional honesty, both on and off stage. He rarely hides his feelings, and when he does, there is usually a strong reason behind it. In the weeks following the album announcement, ARMY began to notice that Jungkook did not give the kind of explicit public reaction that might have been expected. There were no long comments, no personal teasers, no direct hints. His silence, rather than being reassuring, felt like a puzzle piece intentionally left blank. Is it possible that Jungkook already knows something that has not yet been announced? This question may sound excessive to some, but to a community that has followed every movement of BTS for years, the suspicion feels reasonable. In the history of BTS comebacks, there has often been a narrative layer that only reveals itself after a certain amount of time. What appears on the surface is merely an introduction, while the emotional core is saved for the moment deemed most appropriate. If this fifth album is truly meant as a gesture of gratitude toward ARMY, could there be a personal message still being withheld? A surprise that will change how this album is ultimately understood. The announcement of a world tour scheduled for January 14, 2026, adds yet another layer of anticipation. A world tour is not just a series of concerts. For BTS, it is an emotional reunion between artists and fans separated by distance and time. The fact that the tour schedule was announced early, even before the album details were fully revealed, feels unusual. It is as if there is an effort to build physical and emotional expectations at the same time, preparing ARMY for an experience that goes beyond simply listening to music. On social media, the narrative has begun to shift from pure excitement toward deeper analysis. Some ARMY members have started linking the number of tracks, 14, to BTS's journey through time, while others have highlighted the phrase fifth album, which feels oddly ambiguous. Hasn't BTS released more albums than that? Why does this naming feel like a reset, a remarking of history? These questions receive no official answers, but that is precisely where their appeal lies. The uncertainty creates a vast space for discussion where every theory, no matter how speculative, feels valid. From an academic perspective, this phenomenon is fascinating to observe. In mass communication theory, silence often functions as a tool to increase audience engagement. By withholding information, the communicator forces the audience to actively participate in the search for meaning. In the case of BTS and HYBE, this strategy appears to be working remarkably well. Rather than losing interest, ARMY has become even more emotionally invested. They are not merely waiting for information, they are collectively building the narrative among themselves. And amid all of this, March 20th increasingly feels like a symbol rather than just a date on the calendar. It has become a convergence point for hope, anxiety, and curiosity. Every day that passes without additional information only strengthens the belief that what will be released is not something ordinary. There is a sense that this album will speak not only about music, but also about lost time, about waiting, and about the changes the BTS members experienced while they were away from the stage. HYBE's silence and Bang Si-hyuk's absence, a way of creating space for a more personal story? Is Jungkook, with his meaningful quietness, waiting for the right moment to open the deepest layer of this comeback? Or is all of this simply a reflection of heightened expectations from fans who have waited too long? The answers remain suspended, but one thing is becoming increasingly clear. The longer this silence lasts, the greater the emotional impact being built. The closer March 20th draws near, the more it feels that this silence is not a passive emptiness, but a tense space charged with energy. Like a long-held breath before a major confession, the atmosphere surrounding BTS's comeback feels heavy, emotional, and almost fragile. ARMY across the world sense the same thing. A mix of excitement, anxiety, and an intuition that something unprecedented is being prepared. The question is no longer whether BTS will return powerfully, but how that return will change everything. HYBE remains silent. There has been no additional statement explaining why this album is referred to as the fifth album. No official clarification about the overarching concept behind it. In an industry that is usually extremely aggressive in its promotions, this stance feels almost subversive. It is as if HYBE is deliberately rejecting old patterns, choosing instead to let the work speak in its own way. To some, this decision appears risky, but to those who understand BTS's history, it feels entirely consistent with their long-held philosophy. Emotional honesty matters more than promotional noise. Bang Si-hyuk has still not appeared in public. The continued absence of the figure who has long served as the bridge between creative vision and business strategy only strengthens the impression that the core focus of this comeback is not the corporation, but the members' stories themselves. In various online discussions, a view has emerged that this is the era in which BTS truly stands as the primary narrators of their own story, without the shadow of an authority figure typically present in the background. If that is the case, then Bang Si-hyuk's silence is not a sign of distance, but an expression of complete trust. And Jungkook? His name continues to echo, now with an even more emotional undertone. For many ARMY, Jungkook is not only the youngest member, but a symbol of BTS's entire journey, from dream-filled adolescence to a maturity forged by time and responsibility. Jungkook's silence ahead of this comeback is being read as deeply personal. Some believe he is holding on to a message too important to be revealed casually. Others feel he may be protecting something, whether emotions, memories, or a truth that would feel too heavy if revealed too soon. The album, with its promised 14 tracks filled with honest stories, now feels like an emotional black box. ARMY imagine each track as a fragment of the members' experiences during the hiatus, military service, and periods of self-reflection that may never have been fully expressed before. If this is true, then it makes sense that everything surrounding it feels deliberately restrained. How could stories that honest possibly be announced in an ordinary way? The website 2026bts.com still stands as a symbol of waiting. Every visit to that minimally informative page feels like knocking on a door that has yet to be opened. Yet that is precisely where its power lies. In a world driven by instant gratification, delay becomes something rare and valuable. Every second without answers only magnifies the impact when those answers finally arrive. Will March 20th be the day all these questions are answered? Or will it instead be the day a new mystery begins? No one truly knows. But one thing feels almost certain. When this silence finally breaks, its impact will not be measured merely in streaming numbers or album sales. It will be felt as a collective emotional release. A moment when a long wait finally finds its meaning in HYBE's silence, in Bang Si-hyuk's absence, and in Jungkook's quiet. ARMY have found something paradoxical, a growing sense of closeness. Because sometimes it is precisely when no one is speaking that the most honest message begins to be heard. And perhaps when March 20th arrives, the world will realize that all these clues were never coincidences, but parts of one larger story, one that was designed from the very beginning to be felt, not merely announced.